Hey guys, it's Kobi McCoull and welcome back to another episode of Tuesday Tunes. In today's episode, I'm going to show you how to make this.
Shivers break my skin. God, if it's all infinity, how can it feel so hard to breathe? The shadows come alive, but this is not a dream. I'm fucking terrified, it's as empty as it seems, and I won't know till it's over. Can't let go, going under, deeper down, and I'm fighting the fire, lighting me up, the edge of the light, but I can't get enough, sting my heart with desire. I'm bleeding in love as the waves rise higher. All I can feel is electric blue. Don't want to believe what I see is true. I don't know where the void will go, only one way out is through.
How did that happen? Super heavy, dark EDM house vibes. I am so excited to show you guys this because I had so much fun putting it all together. So, easiest place to start is the drums because that's where everything is founded upon. Because that's what grounds everything and gives it that house EDM energy. And funnily enough, the drums are actually very simple, but that's actually a key feature. I tried adding in more complex variations and patterns and so on, but this is a perfect example of where simplicity rules. Here's how they sound on their own. And then the hats come in. So it's not that complicated, but what it does do is really powerful. So we're at a tempo of 126, which is a pretty common tempo for this genre of music. So although the drums themselves are simple, the way that they're mixed is really important, and they have a really strong sidechain with both the kick and the snare, so that they are ducking all the other elements that are coming in. And that's really significant to keeping control of everything, because it gets quite crazy. Here's the next element that I added on top, was this instrument, well, it was a synth in Serum that I decided to call POWWEEER, because that's exactly what my reaction to it was. I've printed it out here, but it was just a Serum patch. It came from a free preset, which I'll put down in the description if you guys want to download it. But then I took the preset and tweaked it and played around with it so that it sounded the way I wanted it to. See? That was all that came to mind. And then I have the drums fading up. And so what was really significant within this instrument was the distortion to give it that energy, but also the control of the energy. And that's where the automation came in. So the automation was really significant. Now I'll show you the MIDI that I've got here originally. The root of each chord it comes back to. So there's a kind of grounding element from that. It ties it well into when the sub and the rest of the other instruments come in. But then I also have the melody up an octave from that root note that it always goes back down to. But also the melody gets busier, so it doesn't have this ARP type melody all the way through. Because if it had that, it would be too crazy and too chaotic at the beginning. And I actually wanted to keep it simple at the first half so that the vocal could fit well around it. And the pace builds with the speed of the rhythm. And then I throw up an octave in the higher parts, the whole thing up an octave in the higher parts, or in the more upbeat sections of the song. So it goes up an octave in the drop. That's just to generate a shift in energy rather than just keeping it the same thing. It just makes it more interesting, and the higher a sound is, usually the more energetic it will tend to feel. Then also, just to add more energy, I have this gross beat automation. And all that is doing is stuttering the sound on and off with time and also with a rhythmic stutter. And I'll open that up just now, just so you can see. But I've automated the amount that it is on up and down because I didn't want it to be on all the time, because again, it would just be far too overwhelming. Probably the most significant thing with this synth was just opening up and closing the filter cutoff. So this little button here gives you so much control as to what's happening with the energy. It can be dark and mysterious down here. Open it right up, and it just sounds insane when it's all the way up there. And then also an octave below, that bass just sounds so cool. So when I open that right up, yeah, go check out the preset down in the description. Now, there was actually quite a lot of bass within that sample, but I didn't want that to be the main thing providing the bass. I wanted to add in the sub. So although it sounded awesome when it was on its own, I knew actually I wanted to take most of the bass out of it and let the sub take over. And then you pull in the drums alongside that. And it's just insane. It's so cool how much energy there is inside that. And all that I did to try and maintain control though over those things was sidechain the kick and the snare to the sub and that instrument, so that we were taming the beast as much as we could. So I will turn the drums off so you can hear the sidechain. It's just ducking pretty aggressively each time. Now I find with the sub bass that it's really just a sub within Serum just holding the note, and I added a little bit of distortion. I tried moving it around and getting it to slide and glide, but it just seemed like it was too much. Sometimes again, the simplicity just won in this case, because you just want it to be thick but not over consuming, because it was the other instruments that were providing the interest alongside the vocals. So the next elements that I added in contrast to the crazy energy, were the elements for the intro and for the softer parts of the vocal, which were a Labs piano, which is free, and I always use this piano and it's down in the description, and then also just an electric guitar that I recorded into the DI, and then just washed them both with quite a lot of reverb and turned the dry signal of both of them down. The guitar itself I actually turned into a pad using the blur tool inside an Edison. So you take your guitar, record it in, then open up an Edison and just press Control B, and it just turns into this luscious atmosphere within the Edison, and then I drag that back out. So the piano itself sounds like this. And I actually had a couple other melodies and other things going on within that piano initially, then I actually realized that all I wanted was a luscious chord, and then the vocals would take over after it. And adding anything else just crowded it too much and took away the attention from the vocals. Again, why I wanted to wash out the guitar too. Initially it was playing little melodies and so on, but that actually drew the attention away from the vocal. And you want the vocal to be the most intimate thing, and the other two instruments are just providing this luscious pad element. So here's the guitar on its own. It gives you shivers the way that these two instruments sound together. And I just sent each of those elements to their own processing, so I either added an imager or I added in slightly more reverb and an EQ just to take away some of the low end so that it wasn't too washed out and muffled. But overall, those elements were actually relatively simple, and I only really have them in the softer parts of the song, and then they just gradually tail out as the rest of the song comes in. Then the very last element of the instrumental were just some risers and fallers, just to emphasize even further the energetic qualities of the drop. I'm always amazed by how discreet these types of risers and fallers seem. Half the time you don't even realize that that is what's making you move, and that's what's creating the energy as much as it is. The only time you really notice is if you turn them off and they're not there. It just feels way emptier, but you can't necessarily say exactly what it is, and I think the reason is because it's not melodic. There's no tonal quality really to them, it's just white noise, but it's amazing how much it transforms the energy of a track. So I just have them panning like crazy from side to side, and then I also have them sidechained really hard with the kick and the snare. As ever, you just want to try and control all of those because you can certainly overdo it. So I do that by having the sidechain and using panning, etc., and then also EQs to remove some of the low end, so that it really is just occupying those higher end frequencies kind of where they belong. And that's it. That's one of the beautiful things about EDM and house music. It doesn't have to be crazy complicated, but the things that you do, you just want to try and make them as tasteful as you can. Then the final element, which is certainly what seems the most important and took a lot of time, is the vocals. So I just came up with the lyrical and melodical ideas whilst listening to the instrumental. I had a rough idea of what I wanted it to do. I knew I wanted a kind of softer, more intimate lead up, and the darkness would actually just come from the lyrics themselves. And then the drop would be way more energetic and much more projected vocally, but I knew that I was going to end up having to probably process those two styles differently because the compressors and other elements of the vocal wouldn't respond the same to a soft intimate signal versus a louder, more projected signal, and that's actually exactly what ended up happening. So the vocal processing is here. I just have a main vocal with my main vocal chain, and then a left and right vocals where it was appropriate, just to add a little bit more size to it. And then I also have them sent to some reverbs and delays just to add even more spiciness to the vocals.
Break my skin.
So I've got two different types of delays. I've got a half delay here, but then I've also got on this reverb, I've got a Valhalla Supermassive, which is providing this kind of crazy dotted eighth delay that you hear here.
My skin. God, if it's all infinity, how can it feel so hard to breathe? The shadows come alive, but this is not a dream. I'm fucking terrified, it's as empty as it seems, and I won't notice over. Can't let go, going under deeper down, and I'm fighting a fire.
Everything that I did, automation was super important with the vocal. The first obvious one is just a volume automation all the way along. And bear in mind, this isn't a final finished track, this was just a beat idea that turned into this. So I would probably do even more volume automation if I was going to make it a finalized track. I have a virtual mix rack here, which has got some pretty heavy compression here with this compressor, and then also just some light EQing and sweetening and so on, but it's mostly the compressor that's the most significant factor. Now if I have this up the whole time, like all the way up,
if it's all infinity, how can it feel so hard to breathe? The shadows come alive, but this is not a dream.
It's okay, but it's just, you can hear that it's been massively compressed. So I just automated that so that it came up in the heavier parts of the drop, so that the vocal was right forward and present, but in the more intimate parts, it's more dynamic. It's not as crazily compressed. Now I still have lots of other compression on the main vocal bus, so a compressor here, and then before the virtual mix track I have a general compressor anyway, just to try and glue everything together and keep it relatively level, but that was the most stylistic side of it. Then I used Little Alter Boy to change the pitch and automate it down in sections where I wanted that to happen.
Seems and I won't notice over.
So just there, it just sounds slightly more almost emotional in a way, because it's like everything was being slowed down a little bit. and then also even more here.
Deeper down and I'm fighting the fire.
It just adds way more character to it. So then within Little Ultra Boy, I also took this drive saturation, which is such a great saturation plugin, and also automated that up here, so that in the bigger sections of the song it was grittier and more in your face, but in the more intimate sections it had little to no saturation comparatively, so that the softness came through.
So infinity. Can't get enough, sting my heart with desire. I'm bleeding in love as the waves rise higher.
Then also in the main sections of the song, I used a gross beat and had a sidechain on the vocals so that it was even heavier.
I'm bleeding in love as the waves.
Just so the whole thing was being pushed down. But I wanted to automate that up and down because I didn't want it to be too intense. So you can see it here. This is what the waveform looks like.
But I can't get enough, sting my heart with desire. I'm bleeding in love as the waves.
But it's relatively subtle. I didn't want to completely duck the main vocal too much because that's the most significant part, but it just blends it together with the kick and the snare much nicer. One of the most significant aspects of getting everything fit well with the drop was just subtly cutting and dragging the vocals just so that they were perfectly in time. So if I turn the metronome on here,
sting my heart with desire. I'm bleeding in love as the waves rise higher.
now with the effects turned off, you can really hear the saturation coming through.
Heart with desire. I'm bleeding in love as the waves rise higher.
You can see that I've cut everything quite aggressively just so that everything just moves really, really tightly with the beat.
All I can feel is electric blue. Though I believe what I see is true, I don't know where the void will go. Only one way out is through.
And I just gently moved everything ever so slightly so that it just fit bang on in with the pocket. So if I then play that with the drums, you'll see exactly what I mean.
All I can feel is electric blue. Though I believe what I see is true, I don't know where the void will go. Only one way out is through.
And that was a really important aspect of it because it sounded great. After I'd recorded the main vocals in, it sounded nice. I was really excited when I lined up that final vocal line because I was also really happy just with the melodies and the rhythms themselves, but chopping them up and just being even more aggressive with that processing just meant that the character that the vocal had was even more emphasized. Then all of the stuff that I'd automated up then comes off again just for the repeat.
Shivers break my skin.
So everything is back to being super intimate again. Then one of the most significant things that I did in the final part of the drop, which is one of my favorite bits of the whole thing, was instead of having that lead synth coming in, I just took everything away. It just has this total eclipse of sound where the whole thing is on, then it all comes off, and then it just emphasizes even more the power behind the track.
All I can feel is electric blue.
And I don't know, I love that bit. I love the whole thing. I'm really pleased with how it came out, and I'm super excited to try and turn that into more of a final track. And yeah, I wasn't really expecting or anticipating the track to go in this direction. I was initially wanting to go for some more kind of chill EDM vibes, but it was asking to go in this direction, so I just went with it. I wasn't necessarily listening to artists like Meduza or Jax Jones or any of the very modern house producers, but it just pulled me in that direction and I just went with it. And that's often one of the best things that you can do, is just let a track go where it wants to go. And yeah, that's that. So I really hope you enjoyed that, and if you learned something, awesome. If you have any questions, please do leave them down below or send me a message on Instagram, and I really look forward to sharing the next video with you. But until then, bye.